The session tonight will be understanding policies and how to drive policy change. Over the next 90 minutes, we're going to talk about policies that affect our work, your child, your families, and how to better be an advocate for policies. We're going to give different perspectives from federal, state, and local policies professionals about early childhood education and education providers. We will focus on these policies that has passed to address the COVID-19 pandemic. We're going to talk about how to become a better advocate and different ways you can engage in advocacy. First, I want to introduce the panelists. We have some wonderful panelists tonight. We have first, Jeffrey Capizzano. Jeff is the president of the Policy Equity Group, an early childhood consultant in Washington, D.C. Prior to forming his own firm, he was the senior policy advisor for early childhood development and learning in the Obama administration. He worked out of Department of Health and Human Services and focused on Head Start and child care policies. Second, we have from a state perspective, we have Michelle Richard, policy advisor of Governor Whitmore. Michelle focused on supporting access to early childhood education and child care. Prior to working with Governor Whitmore, Michelle was vice president at the Public Sector Consultant when she managed projects and conducted policy analysis over some years. Number of education topics includes early childhood education. Next, from a local perspective, we have Shondra Marshall, the implementation policies and research manager of Hope Start Here, Detroit Early Childhood Partnership. In this role, she explored the impact of early childhood education into intersectional of policy, data, and research practices. Thank you all for joining us tonight. So now we're going to start off with the first question. We're going to talk about the importance of being a good advocate in knowing the policy knowing the policy opportunities that might be available as we are in the policy landscape in the election that was happened over a month ago. We are participating in policy changes in this landscape. So let's talk about that for a minute. Jeff, you want me to throw that question out to you first?
Sure thing. Thank you, Waymond, and thank you all for allowing me to be on the panel. I've been tuning into these sessions and I've learned so much, so I'm really happy to be a part of this. Like you said, Waymond, I think one of the ways that you are a good advocate is you really try to capitalize on the opportunities that are available and kind of know what's going on. And I think when I think about what's going on at the federal level, there are really kind of three areas that you really want to think about moving forward. Back in late March, the CARES Act was passed, that Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, which had, all of the money for the stimulus checks and unemployment insurance, and there was money for childcare and Head Start in there, and that money's pretty much gone now. And so what Congress is working on now is another relief package. And so on Tuesday, members of Congress got together and came up with kind of a bipartisan bill to provide more relief to everybody who so desperately needs it. And I think, there's a lot of political wrangling going on right now on the Hill about whether or not it's going to get passed. It's either, the Democrats don't think it's enough money, the Republicans think it's too much money as a part of the stimulus. So one of the things that we need to be thinking about is, advocacy around getting this stimulus money passed. I think the other sort of things that are going on at the federal level in addition to that stimulus is, every year the government has to be funded and Congress has to pass kind of an annual appropriations, and that's going on at the same time. And typically, a budget is supposed to be passed by the end of September. Congress didn't get it done, so they've got what they call a continuing resolution going on until December 11th. And in that is money for Head Start, money for childcare. And there's really very small increases to the early childhood funding in that federal budget. And so that's kind of another thing that we need to be thinking about as advocates. And then, the third thing is really the Biden agenda. We're hoping that, Biden will actually be able to walk through the doors of the White House in January, given everything that's going on. And he's got this, really pretty robust agenda around early childhood, where he's talking about universal pre-K. He's talking about, more funding and more respect for the early childhood workforce, things that as early childhood advocates, we've been waiting for, people to say. And so part of our work is, and what's interesting about his platform is it's really kind of a framework. And there's a lot of work that we need to do kind of filling it out. So he wants to do universal pre-K. What does that mean exactly? Is that going to be a mixed delivery? Is it going to be through the schools? We want it to be sort of, we want childcare providers to get that money just like we want schools to. And so, we're going to have to be working on that sort of early in the Biden administration. So those are just kind of some of the things that are going on right now at the federal level, and look forward to talking a little bit more about that in a bit.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Michelle, could you please give us the state perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you to all of you for hosting this event as well. I'm just delighted to be here. I have 3 more things to add to your list from a state perspective, and certainly some overlap with what Jeff was talking about. I think we certainly have our eye on another COVID relief package from the federal government as well. Governor Whitmer has been a consistent and loud advocate for the need for additional federal resources to support our response here. And we've been consistent that childcare has to be part of that response. We certainly know the toll that COVID has taken, and we've made, I think, some significant investments in supporting local programs and supporting families. It's not enough. We know you're facing tremendous challenge. So advocating with our federal partners has certainly been a big priority. But we need your help understanding what the most effective policies look like in the next phase, right? We had a strategy in the spring, summer, and fall that was evolving based on feedback that we got from you in real time. And I think we continue to be at a moment where we need input from providers on the ground about what you need next. I've been doing calls with providers one-on-one this week. The governor and I met with providers earlier this week. We've been really trying to put our ear to the ground to say what's happening in your world and how can we be supportive. In addition, we will be moving through a typical state budget process as well. That federal money would likely happen independent of our state budget process. So in February, the governor will make a proposal for how she believes we should fund the state in the next fiscal year, and then we will be negotiating with the legislature sometime before our fiscal year starts on October 1. And so having input from you about the impact of state policies on childcare and on early learning and education. So for example, in January, we are going to be able to realize one of those policy changes from last year where we're going to increase income eligibility for the childcare subsidy. So starting in January, families who make up to roughly $39,000 for a family of 4 will be able to access the child care subsidy, which is much more than a family can make today. So I think there's a real impact there. The third place is maybe one that I never thought of as policy when I was a first grade teacher earlier in my career, but it's all of the administrative decisions the state makes on a regular basis. The licensing rules, our quality system. We need to hear from you where there are hiccups. I keep asking people, I know funding is your number one, but what's the pebble in your shoe that if we could fix this small problem, it would make your life just a little bit easier? We know you're stretched. How can we make the decisions we make on a daily basis work for you more effectively?
Thank you so much, Michelle. Now, Shondra, I hope you can provide some information on Hope Start Here. Shout out to Denise Smith. I see her online here. Wonderful lady, a mentor of mine. Great to have her here. But Shondra, could you please?
Thank you so much. And thank you again for having me this evening. We do know that the first 8 years provide a critical window and opportunity, but however, we must continue to address disparities that exist due to historical exclusion and racism. We need a better way. We need an equitable way. And that is why, to Michelle's point, educating or advocacy is really key for continued progress. So in Detroit, 300 families were surveyed this summer, and over 50% mentioned cost as a barrier to access to childcare. And so at Hope Starts Here, we actually have 26 policy priorities, but we have aligned our current policy efforts around 3 policy priorities, which include establishing, sustaining a comprehensive workforce strategy. You know, we all know the early childhood workforce is undervalued and underpaid, which makes it difficult to retain and recruit professionals to meet those demands. And as mentioned earlier on the cost of childcare, that poses a major barrier to some families. And so the second policy priority is to increase the childcare subsidy rate to include both the subsidy, which impacts families, and then also the contract reimbursement, which impacts early educators simultaneously. And so, and as a first step to increase access to quality medical care and social service needs is establishing a universal screening and referral system. And so this system would ensure that all pregnant mothers and children are screened for developmental delays and disabilities early on, as well as offering referrals and resources and additional supports as needed. So that is the third policy priority. So on a community level, we all can lean in, as Michelle and Jeff have mentioned, to make a difference. There has been, I know on this series, there has been inclusion of the Detroit Champions for Hope, which really aims to engage parents and caregivers and providers in the city of Detroit to make sure that they are their children's first champions.
Yes.
And so under the distributed leadership model within Hope Starts Here, we have 6 imperatives, and we also have 15 strategies. And so the Detroit Champions for Hope is in alignment with imperative 2. And though they have 3 strategies that they function within, and I'm just going to share them very briefly, which is to support the role of families in children's development, to improve the processes, programs, and systems that support parents and caregivers, and also to create a team of advocates to champion early childhood. So it is extremely promising and exciting to see the much needed work of imperative 2 to make such a great impact. And many are familiar with the 6-a-days, which is awesome. And there are other ways to remain engaged, including getting connected with imperative 2 to learn more, since there are things always in motion, and including trainings and other opportunities. Additionally, we recently hosted Hope Starts Here, a policy summit in October, which we hope that all community members, including parents and caregivers and early childhood educators, continue to partner with us for that event on an annual basis. And so we need to hear your voices. So keep an eye out for next year's summit. And you can visit our website to see video clips of the 2020 summit.
Thank you so much. So please use the chat. If you have any questions, please use the chat. Panelists, what should we be doing to make the policy opportunities that you discussed? What should we be doing here?
Sure. I think, this is really, timing is everything, right, in advocacy. And, there are critical decisions being made right now at the federal level related to this new relief package. And I think, one of the things I didn't mention, which is interesting, is that big relief package that happened in March. It was $2 trillion, over $2 trillion, had $3.5 billion for childcare. So really kind of a small amount relative to the big package. So this new relief package that they proposed this week is a much smaller package overall. It's only like $900 billion, but it has $10 billion of childcare, 3 times as much childcare money in it. And, we need to get that passed. And so, any way that you feel comfortable advocating for this stimulus, you should be doing so, and you want to be calling your, delegation, your Michigan congressional delegation, Stabenow and Peters, and your congresswoman, you can be working through advocacy organizations. And I think, one of the things that, I heard on one of the earlier sessions around this was, advocacy is really about turning your experiences into power. Right. So what you want to do is take your experiences and share them with this delegation to let them know how important it is, how much you're suffering, and how much you need this relief package. And that's probably the strongest sort of way to do advocacy.
Thanks, Jeff. Michelle, do you want to take a stab at the question?
Yeah, I think something that's been really remarkable about the pandemic is it has taken childcare challenges that families across the state are facing, and it's brought them into your living room on a Zoom like this. I'm a mom. I have a 5 and 3-year-old, and it's pretty infrequent that I make it through a day without one of them making an appearance. And everyone laughs, and it's become part of our culture that childcare is a challenge right now. I can't imagine having my little ones interrupt my Zoom a year ago. It would have been extremely disruptive. That's a tremendous opportunity. Childcare was an issue all of us cared a lot about a year ago, but it was harder to get energy in other coalitions that are maybe louder in Lansing or more organized in Lansing. And I think there's a real opportunity to activate people like employers who are feeling pressure when their employees are stretched between being parents and being at work, being on their computers. All of those things are an opportunity. And I think starting to cultivate champions among your new lawmakers, calling them saying, I know childcare is a challenge because I'm working every single day to make sure our community has quality care. Can I Zoom or FaceTime or show you what I'm doing over here? Right? I know it's probably uncomfortable to have them in your space right now, but they can come virtually into your space and see that there are people fighting for families right now and that those people are struggling. I think the opportunity often is to be able to ground our work, not only in the challenges it creates for providers, like many of us on the call, but for the families and workers that you're serving. And that's something that really motivates action. I also think, Jeff is spot on. Your experience is so valuable. No one else knows what you know. And if you don't tell us what you know, then we can't support you. And so being able to celebrate the work that you're doing, but also be honest about the challenges you're facing. I just continue to be in awe. I've been in early childhood my whole career, but the resilience, the heart, the passion of this field. And I think sometimes it's hard to say, I'm really struggling as a provider, as a professional, and know that vulnerability is so valuable in us as policymakers being able to support you. So I think having the vulnerability to share the challenges that are really intimate to your day-to-day work, I think is the other part of it, right? Showcase it and show off, and then be honest about the challenges you're facing so that we can be on your team. And not just cheer you on, though I think that is part of it, but also make sure that in our policy decisions, we're bringing your lived experience and your everyday experience to the forefront.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And you are absolutely correct. Please, folks, use the chat. The ones that's closer to the ground can tell us how hot it is. And we have these wonderful panelists on right here on Zoom that is advocating for us. So, Shondra, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I'll be brief. I think Jeff and Michelle said it best, but essentially we should not let up. We must continue to educate others of what's most helpful to the community members. And that is why advocacy is so important. So we should continue to partner to make progress on each policy opportunity. And so community members, please continue to use your voice and share what you need.
Thank you so much. Could you please describe the steps involved in making change, developing a policy? What are budget impacts?
Sure, I can start. I think, one of the key things and what I think our role as advocates is, like, in order to actually pass or implement some sort of policy, there has to be an awareness of the problem that the policy needs to solve. And so, that's in the policy world, they call that agenda setting. It's like, the first thing is about articulating the problem. And I just wanted to tell a quick story, kind of following up on what Michelle said about sort of experiential advocacy. And so, I think there's a key equity issue here that we need to talk about, like, upfront and early, because I want it to be sort of part of the conversation kind of going forward. But so, I live on Capitol Hill, and I work with a lot of people who are much better resourced than I am and our community is around advocacy. And so I've had the opportunity to see sort of the way that, like, Boeing and Honeywell and all of these really big companies can do their lobbying. And so what they've done is they've developed these things called experience centers. So Honeywell, you should Google this, it's amazing. Honeywell has this thing called the Honeywell Technology Experience Center. So what they do is they take members of Congress into this experience center, and if they're trying to get FAA regulations changed for their avionics for their planes, they have a flight simulator there where the member of Congress can get in the flight simulator, program in their home airport, and then land the plane successfully with Honeywell technology. And so they get to experience what the technology does in a way that is really at the highest level. And, talking to the Honeywell folks, they're like, when you have two senators fighting over the flight simulator, you've got them, right? And so, like Michelle said, like, how do you take your experiences and bring members of Congress into what you're experiencing in a way that will be compelling to them and that they'll really get it? And so, and that's part of like the agenda setting function, is like, really having them recognize the problem that needs to be solved. And then from there, it's about, what is the policy solution, working, with policymakers to figure out what the best approach is. Is it funding? Is it changes in regulations? And then, building the coalition. It's like, who else is has this similar concern? And when I talk in the training, I'll talk a little bit about, it's really about, the size of the group and the intensity of the feeling that creates the power. And so it's really important to build a coalition as well. So.
Thank you, Jeff. Michelle, you want to chime in?
I just want to add, when I was teaching first grade, I had the Schoolhouse Rock videos, and we bring that in to say, right, here's the process. And it was the same process that Jeff talked about. It was this very linear. This step happens and it happens until it ends, and then the next step happens. And I think in practice, it's more like those gear toys that kids play with, the boards where you put all the different gears and you can turn the wheel and all the gears are always turning at the same time. And I think that's a better representation of how the policy process works. These pieces are always moving all the time. So while sometimes there are missed opportunities, right, at some point the COVID relief package will pass. But if our broader goal, or your broader goal, is to say, I want our industry to be recognized by policymakers, there's always an opportunity for that. So you're not going to miss something if you're not ready to engage in a new way, or you want to start small. Those gears are changing and moving all of the time. And it's our job in roles like I have to be able to listen to what you're saying and plug you in and support this industry. And I think that's exactly why I have the pleasure and honor to serve in my role, but I think everyone on this call and many, many others who are always trying to help say, where is the gear that has the most opportunity for your voice to make an impact?
Thank you so much. The next question is for you, Shondra. With the election just took place, and we all know what surrounded that, with the people feel like their voice is not being heard. Right now, Hope Star here is one of the leaders organizations here in the city of Detroit, also in the state of Michigan. How could early childhood professionals engage to make sure their voice is being heard? Right now, people feel like their voice is really not being heard. So how do they connect with Hope Stars here and ensure they getting what they need, and also supporting you to make sure their voice is being heard?
Thank you for that question. As I mentioned earlier, I think really connecting with our parent engagement imperative, which is imperative number 2. Also ensuring that even on our website, hopestartsheredetroit.org, there's a section on there where you can make a pledge to become an early childhood champion. And so having those, having that is really pivotal for our community as well. Additionally, some things are coming up. One thing is the Seat at the Table series is coming up. And so just really engaging with us when we host events and hold different opportunities will be a good way to have that happen.
Thank you so much. And the same question back to you, Michelle. How do, right now, folks who feel like they're really not being heard at all, how do they engage as far as state? What should they be doing as early childhood professionals? As many folks on here is aware, a lot of the Head Start workers was parents first, and a lot of early childhood education providers have kids. They're trying to do Zoom. They're trying to teach. They're trying to ensure that essential workers are receiving the best child care possible. So how could they really engage and feel like their voice is being heard about this profession?
Yeah, I'm really grateful for anyone who's sitting there, on their couch, trying to not just mindlessly scroll through Facebook like I am after a really, really long day, and then instead is saying like, my voice is important, how can I engage? So like step one, the fact that that's on your radar is amazing, and I'm grateful to you for that. Sitting on your couch on your cell phone, I think there are things you can do, right? I hear from providers all the time, if you send me one more survey, I am going to throw you out a window. And I get it. But let me tell you, when you fill out a survey, and I know MDE is doing their market rate survey right now, how important and valuable it is that you take 10 minutes, 15 minutes and sit on your couch on your phone and tell us a little bit about what you're living and seeing every single day. That survey completion is advocacy. You're sharing your experience, giving us feedback as state partners, and we use that to inform every decision we're making. So, complete the survey. You're ready to take another step. The governor, your local lawmaker have easy forms online where you can share your experience with a lawmaker right away. Even easier than a letter, no printer and stamp required, but you can reach out to us directly and share that information. I know here in the governor's office, we have a constituent team, which is just a group of people who are reading all of your outreach. And then frankly, when they have questions, they don't know, they send it over to me and say, I'm talking to a childcare provider. What does this mean? How is it working? Can we fix this for them? Someone reached out and said, how come this document's not translated? It should be in Spanish. Can we make that translation happen? And we did. We made the update. And I know that's a really small thing, but again, advocacy having an impact. Signing up for emails from state offices like our partners at MDE, Laura, so that you're informed on what's happening. That's all free to do. And then sharing your experiences with people like Shondra, so she can talk to lawmakers on your behalf all the time. I mean, ultimately, we'd love to have some of you up here in Lansing someday. So that we can actually sit with lawmakers in an office, but that gets my heart racing every time I have to do it. So I understand if you're maybe a little nervous too, but there's lots of steps before that, and we'd love to have your voice in it.
Thanks so much. Jeff, this question is for you. We know you're in Washington, D.C., you come back and forth to Michigan all the time, and we appreciate you coming down here. But could you give us an example of how folks came together and advocated for something and a change was actually made? Right now, people, once again, we're going to stick to, with this whole election, we're not going to stick to election, but people's voice not being heard. And right now, the citizens and also early childhood professionals feel like their voice is not being heard. But you in Lansing, and I'm pretty sure you hear some rumbling. Do you hear our noise? Do you hear us?
Yeah, I think, it's a tough one, because I was trying to think about how an example that might sort of lead into the training later. So the one example that keeps popping up, and it's not a great one, I don't think, but it was the work that the Pew Charitable Trust did around the expansion of state pre-K initiatives. And so what was interesting about that was that they had sort of two separate kind of groups working on this, because I think, what we'll talk about a little later is, you need to have an ask, and we'll talk about sort of how to sort of develop it. Like, what do you want the policymaker to do? And then you need a rationale, like, why do you want them to do it? How is it affecting you? How is it going to change your life? And so what the Pew Charitable Trust did with this, with that model, was that they funded this organization called Pre-K Now, which was the advocacy arm. I'm sure you guys have heard of it, right? And so they were really working on the ask pieces of it. It's like, what do they want, and how do they sort of work with state legislators to get, pre-K into those states? And then they had this other organization, the National Institute for Early Education Research, or NEAR, developing the rationale. And so having the advocacy and then the research group working together to, advocate for pre-K in these states really worked. And so, kind of just thinking about that model, and then kind of taking it down to the individual level, and just kind of thinking about, okay, what is it that I really want? And then how do I talk about how it's going to make a difference for me, like the rationale? I think those two things sort of working together creates kind of the context for policy change. Sorry, not to give a better example, but that one kept on popping into my head.
Thank you. Michelle, could you take a stab at that, please?
I want to add one that's recent and maybe a little bit hyper local. So I'm sure, or I hope, a lot of our childcare providers on the call received funding through the Child Care Relief Fund. And I know you lived through the state learning a lot, as you learned a lot as we distributed those dollars. One of our later rounds, we hosted webinars and you attended. And over a handful of events, I had 1,000 people make comments in the chat box. So when Waymond says, like, put your ideas in the chat box, well, 1,000 of you in a couple of days did, and it was hard because 1,000 people having questions about a program is not fun as a program administrator, because it means you missed something. But with 1,000 comments from all of you, I took your feedback to our legislative partners and we made a change. So you had told us, you know, tuition credits for families is really important. We know our families are struggling, but the way you're making us administer this is a nightmare. It's expensive, it's hard. Can you make it easier? And the legislature had told me no. But when I had 1,000 of you standing behind me, they said, well, yeah, that makes sense. We can make that change. So in our last round of grants, we not only made it a flat rate tuition, which I know is still a little imperfect, and policy is rarely perfect, but it was easier to administer and we were able to get funding for you directly. And I attributed that to the fact that you spent time in your evening, attended a webinar and put comments in a comment box, and there were 1,000 of you that did. And that really allowed us to change that policy to work better for you and hopefully put a little bit more money in your pocket to help your business operate this fall and winter. Thank you so much.
Shondra, with being a part of a wonderful group and leaders in the city of Detroit, why is it important for community members in the city of Detroit to consult and stay engaged in policy matters?
Yeah, I think we're all saying the same thing, and I think it's really important to hear the voices of the community. Mm-hmm. It is our role, and especially at Hope Starts Here, to support the community, to encourage and empower the community, and to support early childhood educators and the workforce. And so just really understanding what works, what doesn't work, what could work is really important for us to do our jobs best.
Thank you so much. Folks, again, please use the chat. We have these wonderful panelists on here who's doing great work, leaders in state, local, and federal level. Please use the chat. What type of advocacy opportunity exists in the city of Detroit? Sean, I'm gonna start back off with you again, local, and then we'll go all the way up to federal level. So if you could just tell us, besides Hope Start Here, all the work you're doing there, what other opportunities exist and how could folks really get engaged?
Yeah, so I did already mention connecting with us. There is a web link in the chat for those to see how to connect with Detroit Champions for Hope. But again, really making sure that your district leaders are aware and informed is key. And I know that Jeff and I will go over some ways to do that and shortly here. The barriers and challenges, again, and they need to be voiced so that organizations that are working in concert with you can align these messages accordingly. Also, there is opportunity for you to engage in other state opportunities. When I know Michelle said it too, when you're tapped on constantly to join any type of committee, be an early childhood educator voice or parent voice, it gets exhausting at times, but that is really ways to, really be a part of the policy efforts in the city of Detroit. And so I just wanted to just reiterate those points specifically. Additionally, going to your own district city council meetings, going to your child care provider, parent meetings, and just making sure that you're engaged in that way is also other opportunities.
Folks, please fill out Detroit Champions from Hope Starts Here. Please fill out the link, become a champion for Hope Starts Here. Go to the website. They have a lot and wonderful information on the website. Please go to the website. Michelle, could you please just tell us how and what advocacy opportunities exist in the city of Detroit that's hidden up there to the state level? Besides,
I always appreciate all the work Shondra and the team are doing to make sure that we're elevating voices from Detroit and how often they're thinking about voices in Southeastern Michigan more broadly. So that we can make sure that we're representing as many points of view on this issue as we can, right? The experiences in Detroit are a little different than the city experiences in the suburbs or the experiences in the rural parts of our state. we want to make sure that any policy we're making is responsive to all of those different needs. So I think we've covered a lot of ground, from complete your survey, please, to give us a call when you can. I do think that making sure that folks like Shondra, partners like your quality improvement consultant, all of them connect with those same meetings. So when you know, you're overscheduled and in the evening just can't take on one more meeting, I think in your day-to-day, when you're running into people like your quality consultant, like your licensing consultant, sharing your experience, we ask them for that same feedback all of the time. So if you're looking for a way to start, that could be a way to do it.
Thank you so much. Before we get to Jeff, please go to Detroit Public TV and like it. It's always wonderful opportunities on there. It's always trainings, professional development. Please stay tuned. Go to the Detroit Public TV website. Let me slow down a little bit and just follow. Jeff, what could we do so we didn't hit local, making some noise? Now we're gonna go to state, make some noise. What do we need to do to get up there to Washington, D.C. to make some noise?
I mean, I just want to kind of follow up on a couple of things that Shondra and Michelle have said. I think, you know, what was fascinating to me, like moving from the advocacy community into a policymaking role at HHS, was the fact that, you know, you're still an advocate even when you're in government. And so you're trying to convince your principal, like I'm trying to convince Secretary Sebelius, you know, at the time to do certain things. I'm trying to convince, you know, the committees in Congress to do certain things. And then when I got letters and calls, that became like political capital for me to use, right? And this was kind of what Michelle was saying. It's like, you know, look, you know, talking to the Secretary's office or to whoever, like, you know, I've gotten 150 calls on this today. We have to do something about it. And I think, you know, going back to kind of the examples of effective advocacy, you know, Waymond, the other one I was going to use because it's so relevant to you was, you know, the designation and renewal system, right? And the accountability framework for Head Start. Right. You know, one of the things that we had worked on in the Obama administration was using class scores to hold Head Start programs accountable. But the way that we did it was we said, okay, in one monitoring cohort, any Head Start program that fell below the 10th percentile of scores had to recompete for their grants. Right. So really super high stakes. But what the advocates were telling us, the Head Start Association and others, was that, you know, that score changes from year to year because It's a percentile. So if I score a 5 one year, and I don't compete, but I score the same score the next year, I might have to compete. So that, you know, how is that fair? Like, you know, why do I have to hit this moving target? And you know, and this current administration heard that loud and clear. And, you know, the change, it took a long time. It took years and years, but, you know, they just recently made a change to that. And so, but it's like, and I think that's kind of part of what is about making your voice heard. It's just, you know, relentless persistence. I mean, it's, you know, I call it practicing polite persistence. You know, you don't go in there necessarily and scream your head off because you're not getting what you want, but you're constantly reminding people of your needs. So, and I got a clap from Denise. I don't think I've ever gotten one of those before. So thank you.
Thanks again.
Can I just confirm what Jeff just said about being an advocate in government? So I did advocacy work in some regards before this job, and it caught me off guard how much advocacy there was and how powerful it was when I could tell someone how many people called me or how many people sent an email, and not a form letter, but took time to share their own experience. I can't overstate how powerful that is, even when they're sharing the very similar experience over and over and over. It is so hard in Lansing to tell when you're hearing a singular experience, one person's experience, versus when one person represents what's happening for everyone. It's very, very hard to tell. And so when a lot of people reach out and they take the time to do that, even from your cell phone on your couch, that is incredibly valuable.
Thank you so much. So before I turn it over to Jeff and Shondra to do their training, please go to the chat box. There's links in there. Detroit Public TV have links in there. Like the page. Follow links. Please sign up to be a champion for Hope Starts Here. Thank you so much. But we're going to now turn it over to Jeff and Shondra. Thank you.
Sounds great. And then Chandra's going to share her screen, and we'll kind of go quickly through some slides. I think, one of the things that we wanted to do is just kind of take the conversation and kind of maybe operationalize or formalize it into a mini training that you could potentially use in terms of, how you might kind of, work on driving some policy change. And so I think, one of the themes has been really about, this is work, right? This is work on top of work that, we're already tired at the end of the day. And so, why do it in the first place? And I think, what's important to understand is like, pretty much everything that goes on with our work as early childhood stakeholders is linked to some sort of policy. If it's like, the training that we need, the ratios we have to adhere to, the subsidies that we're getting, all of it is governed by some sort of policy. So you really need to be engaging. And, one of the words that, we use a lot is like, you want to have like, practitioner informed policy. It's really important in order for policymakers to get this work right. They need to hear from you and be informed by you. And, engaging in advocacy, just, make sure that, policies are really working for you. And so, I think, one of the points, that I made earlier and I wanted to make again was about, lending your voice really is important for fairness and equity. And I, kind of a story about this is, working on, different regulations, and, putting out like a rule about something like ratios or the designation renewal system. I was at an event, and when I was still in the administration, and someone came up to me and they're like, why did you do it that way? And they explained their story. And I'm like, you never came to talk to me. How am I supposed to know that? You have to talk to me in order for me to be able to get this right. And I think what's really kind of troubling about this, of the way the political system works, is that, if you're not talking to a policymaker, somebody else is, right? And it's typically those people who have better resources and more time that are the ones that are doing it, and they might have a different perspective than you. So, you really have to take the time to try to do this, even though we're so tired. And because it's like, if they don't hear your perspective, there's no way that they can react to it. So, and they're going to take somebody else's perspective instead. So I think that's kind of an important point, and that's why you need to engage. Next slide. So, and I think, we talked about this already, but I really just like this notion of, turning your experiences into power. I think, when we talk about like, what is advocacy, it's really about using your experiences, using your perspectives to inform how policy is made and how policy is changed. And, there's a bunch of different ways to do advocacy. And I think Michelle did a really good job kind of talking about it and explaining. It's like, you get on your phone at the end of the day, send an email. So there's just a lot of different ways to do it. You can do the in-person meetings with policymakers. That's kind of a, post-COVID approach. You can do phone calls. You can do letters, email, social media. So those are all kind of like direct advocacy approaches where you're like really you yourself are doing the advocacy, but there's a bunch of different ways where you can do indirect advocacy. You can sort of work with Shondra, like, join the Hope Starts Here team and talk to people at Hope Starts Here about sort of your experiences, join an association, join an advisory board, take the survey, as Michelle said. That's advocacy. All of that is advocacy. And I think we want to stop just for a second. One of the things I was really curious about is, among this group, what kinds of advocacy you're doing. And I think we're going to try to do a poll, if we can cue that up really quick. So, one of the things we'd like to know is like, if we were to work with you on advocacy, like what methods or methods have you used when you've done advocacy? Or if you haven't done advocacy, what would you be most comfortable doing to connect with policymakers? Are you okay with in-person phone calls? What would be your preferred method? And I'll give you a second to do that. I think can you choose more than one? And you can choose more than one. I think the results will pop up in a minute, so we can see. Cool. Does everybody have a chance to vote? Do we have the results? Oh, it was a good try. Oh, there we go. Oh, good. So this is good, because I think you've got about 70% of you saying that you're willing to do the in-person meetings. That's good to know. Phone calls, letters. No one. Okay, great. So I think as we think about sort of the strategy that we'll talk about in a minute, this is really helpful for me to think about sort of what your preferences are. But you guys seem to be up for pretty much anything, so I appreciate that. And I think the one other point, I think we made this already, but we wanted to talk more about it, is like, it really is like the best way to do advocacy is to do experiential advocacy. I gave that Honeywell example where, that's sort of, what the most resourced advocacy lobbying organizations do. But the question is like, how would you share your experience with policymakers? It used to be where, pre-COVID, we would get, policymakers to come into our programs. They would read to the children. They'd be able to experience their joy and learn about sort of, all the work that you're doing as a Head Start program, as a childcare program, how you're not only sort of supporting parents and their ability to work, but also promoting the school readiness of the kids. And so, when you're thinking about sort of how to approach a policymaker, really always think about this experiential lens and ways in which you can get them to experience sort of what you're doing, what you're feeling, and what your issues are. Next slide. Well, I guess, wait a minute. So before we move on to this, Michelle, I was just wondering, like, so when advocates or stakeholders come and talk to you, like, what kinds of things are you trying to get from them, or what makes for a good meeting with a stakeholder?
Sure. Thanks, Jeff. I wanted to echo, before I jump in on that, just want to echo your comment about experiential advocacy. And I think how few lawmakers or policymakers in general that I work with who have a really good picture in their mind about what quality childcare looks like. And so I think while your day-to-day experience feels like your day-to-day experience, I really think they need help. Lots of people need help getting that picture in their mind about what it looks like for children to have that experience, what early educators are doing every single day. And I think having them in diverse environments so that they can see home-based, center-based, family home, group home, all of those have a different hum to them. And I think that that's a real asset to advocacy. So I'm excited about that. I feel like I've said, tell me what your problem is over and over. But if we don't know, then we can't help you. And so I think a good meeting for me, particularly when it's with frontline staff. So if you own a childcare or you're an early educator, being able to hear you celebrate the work that you're doing, it's fun to see the sparkling in someone's eye when they talk about the work that they really love. But then say, here's what's preventing me from doing more of that every single day. I certainly expect our advocate partners, those who are trained advocates, to have a really clear ask and to come in with a clear plan and really strong data. But when we're meeting with practitioners, we want to hear your personal experience and the value that you're bringing is sharing what your day-to-day is. So keep sharing. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you, Michelle.
So can you go back to that slide? Sorry. So I think, we talked a little bit about this before, but I think, if you think about sort of what is power when it comes, what is political power? and sort of how do you show it? It's really, this is the equation really. It's like, how big this is, and when policymakers, like particularly those that are elected officials, like in the legislature, like when they're thinking about sort of what they want, what they need to do, and who's talking to them, what they think about is like, how big is this group and how intense is their feeling? And then, that really, the bigger the group and the more intense the feeling, the more likely that there's going to be some movement. And I hate to use this example, but, when you think about sort of the NRA, for example, the National Rifle Association, why are they so powerful? It's like, because they show that they are of large size and they are very passionate about their issue. And so, when we think about sort of our work, we have to be, we are a big group, obviously, and we have to be equally as passionate and intense about, our issues. And so that really helps to be effective as advocates. And so just a few sort of comments about sort of, how do you show sort of like, being a large group? And you can go to the next slide, Ashley. It's like, and we talked about this earlier, it's like, the number of letters, the number of calls, the number of emails, those sorts of things that are coming into us really shows, that you have a large group size. And again, we as, when I was, a policymaker, we would use that as leverage to try to get things done. The number of people at events, like, when we can actually do that again, it's like, just showing up at an event and, if it's a sort of a early childhood day at the Capitol, those things are really important. You show your, strength in numbers. And then, around, showing intensities of feeling, it's like, you volunteer, again, showing up and you find ways to engage. And I think, it's okay to be passionate about your work. And I think, Michelle talked about, they want to see the sparkle in your eye and how you light up about your work. Again, you have to be, practice that polite persistence. And then I guess the other thing that's really important around intensity of feeling, and this is sort of where I got a little frustrated, when I was at HHS, is, being responsive. So you've had the meeting, you've made you've made your case, and then there might be things that we need to follow up on. And then, I follow up, I send an email, and then I don't hear from anyone again. And so, following up, being responsive is a way to show that this is a serious issue for you, and you have intense feelings about it. So I think that's kind of even if it's kind of a short response, it's important to respond. And then, again, just really highlighting the notion that this is not easy to do. We're not trained to do this. We have full-time jobs. It's hard, but it's worth sort of the time, and it's worth engaging sort of, as Michelle, some of these professional advocates, and sort of, doing your advocacy through them as well. And then you just kind of thinking about sort of how to do advocacy. I've been using this term, you need to have an ask. That's, it doesn't have to be that formal. It's like, are there things that are working for you right now in terms of policy? You got this funding, from the stimulus, and it was really helpful. And the ask might be like, I need more of that. That worked really well for me. I need it. If there are, things that aren't working for you, there are certain regulations that get in your way. This DRS accountability example that I showed, the ask might be, we really need, you to stop doing this. This is really getting in the way of our ability to do a good job serving parents and children. Or, things that might be missing. If there's an issue that you might be having where there isn't a policy solution, it's like, I need help with this. And that's an ask. And so, one of the things that you want to do too is, what is the reason, for the ask? And so what's the rationale? So you can be like, I'm asking you for this because, it's good for children. I'm asking you to stop this because it's hurting my business. And I need your help with this because it will make me more effective in my job. And so my role in society is to take care of kids safely while parents are working and support their school readiness. And if you help me with this, it will make me more effective. I guess, one of the other things that was kind of interesting to me when I was at HHS was that people would come and talk to me about things that I had no control over. So I was at HHS and they might talk to me about, early childhood special ed, which is actually something that would make sense that I would know about and have control over, but that was actually at the Department of Education. So, one of the things you need to think about is, understanding kind of who represents you and who would be the right person to talk to, and then also who are the people that work on the issue. And so you need to do kind of just a little bit of homework on that. And that's a role of sort of these of Shondra and kind of other organizations to help you with that. Next slide. And then, one of the things that, as a resource, if we can get this out for all of you, the Bipartisan Policy Center, which is an organization in DC, did this really amazing toolkit. And it talked about like, what is the most effective messaging when you're talking about, support for childcare and early childhood. And they use this really famous pollster, his name's Frank Luntz. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of him, but he did a lot of work testing different messages around early childhood and trying to figure out which ones would be sort of most effective for, when you're talking to policymakers about early childhood. And, the types of messages that polled best with policymakers had to do with, growth and success of the kids, like, my ask, the reason that why you want to help me with my work is because I'm really helping to prepare children to learn, grow, and succeed. And, all the stuff that I'm doing is, impacting young kids. I mean, this is stuff that, we know already, but is important to make sure that policymakers are understanding. Equity and equality issues resonated well with policymakers. It's, you need to provide this funding because every child and family deserves equal access to quality early childhood education. And then they found that positive messaging, sort of like the way that we promote positive outcomes, work better than negative messaging. And so I would highly recommend, as you guys go forward with your work, to look at the Bipartisan Policy Center toolkit and use it as you think about sort of ways of talking with policymakers. And then I think, yeah, so that's sort of, my take on it. And, Shondra will sort of reflect on some of this and talk about going forward.
Thank you, Jeff. I just want to provide a few aspects of guidance, which was established around the development of Hope Starts Here. As parents and community members continue to use your voice, keep these top of mind. That Hope Starts Here was birthed out of the voices of the community, respectively. And so originally, our work was guided by 4 beliefs or values, which was every child in Detroit deserves the same chance to grow up and succeed. There are great ideas in Detroit, and there are great ideas outside of Detroit, and we can and should use those insights to learn from both. And every Detroiter has a role to play in making our city a great place for children. We all can do something. And the 4th is healthy families mean healthy kids. So our work must focus on family too. So this is extremely important to essentially just recognize how things evolve and the time it may take to see movement. Parent and caregivers and community voice is key to policy change. I know you've heard that over and over again tonight, because it's our jobs, those of us on this panel, to amplify your voice rather than speak for you. I know earlier on in this evening, you heard of ways to get engaged. And so I encourage everyone to remain connected. In addition to what's already been shared, as I stated, those district-wide city council, school district, child care provider, parent meetings is something that you can do most immediately to ensure your voices are heard and being amplified best. So in Michigan, we do have much work to do, but there are also opportunities to make successful progress. And so I think I will continue on, and I think it's live questions and answers. If I can get there we go. So I think, Waymond, we're at the point where we can answer questions.
Thank you so much. Welcome back. Folks, please put your questions in the chat box. If you're on Facebook Live, on Detroit Public TV, put it in the chat box as well. The first question is, how does the panel feel about Child Care for Working Families Act? So any one of y'all can take a stab at this, but Jeff, look like you ready from the federal level. So you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't looked at that piece of legislation in a while, but
Okay.
what I remember from it is something I think we could definitely get behind. It had, a significant increase in, funding for childcare. I mean, on the order of like, tens of billions of dollars, which is, essentially what we need, to provide subsidies for working families and to fund families in a way that would or provide subsidies that would really ensure higher quality care. And the other piece, if I remember correctly, had funding for facilities.
Okay.
And I think, one of the things that I know is a big issue in Detroit, I think IFF is probably going to talk about it on the next session, but, the places where we are caring for our children are in disrepair. And we really need to think about ways to do a better job funding and supporting renovation of early care and education facilities. I know that is something that Biden has talked about as part of his caring agenda. And there's a piece of federal legislation called Child Care is Infrastructure that provides funding not only for grants to states, but also, and this kind of goes back to understanding the problem. What's interesting about the Child Care Infrastructure Act is that it has funding to fund a short-term and long-term assessments of facilities. And so we can get a better handle on exactly the problem, everything from not enough outdoor space to poor air quality, poor water quality, those sorts of things. So, once I'm almost scared to get the results of a national assessment of facilities, but I think that will help to shine light on why we would need more funding for it.
Thanks so much, Jeff. Michelle, same question to you. How does the panel feel about the Child Care for Working Families Act?
I'm really energized by how much attention there is at a federal level to have President-elect Biden talking about childcare, to have congressional delegations talking about childcare. I think is a tremendous step forward and a really good signal, frankly, of the work of the advocacy community nationally in being able to amplify voices from families, from providers, and saying, we aren't doing enough here. We're making a significant investment, but it's not enough because there's a significant cost to providing high quality care, and we need to support you in being able to do that. We know parents can't afford to do it all alone. Right. And so how do we leverage available public dollars and federal resources and a tight state budget are always welcome to be able to support critical things like early learning.
Thank you. Shondra, did you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, just essentially just glad to have the light shine on early as it should have been in the first place, but so eager to see more progress to be made.
Thank you so much. The next question is, first, I'm gonna say it again, please put your questions in the chat. It's not often that we have these wonderful guests on this platform. We have Jeff from federal level, we have Michelle from state level, we have Shondra from local level, from Hope Stars Here, who's one of our champions. Please go on the link and sign up for Detroit Champions for Hope Stars Here. And let's get to the next question. What is the best way to engage lawmakers? Is it a difference between what they need to do, what we need to do? So I'll start off with you, Shondra. I mean, how do we engage lawmakers on this local level first?
So one thing I mentioned earlier on is that Hope Starts Here. We have actually 26 policy priorities. Mm-hmm. And so what's already been shared is that there is much work to do. However, it might be just a little bit overwhelming for more than one reason to advocate for more than 3 or 4 at a time. And so I would just suggest to plan to basically draft a roadmap to never step away from the plan, but be willing to pivot given the environmental climate, and also be willing to adjust based on budget opportunities. And so making those connections with legislators and community leaders to garner support is an important step for progress.
Thank you. Michelle?
Yeah, I would add, be persistent. And if they don't respond, assume it's them and not you.
Mhm.
So I do think it's really easy to put your heart and soul on paper or in an outreach and then feel like someone wasn't responsive to you, which is crummy. We want to be as responsive as we can to residents across the state, but it definitely happens. And so if you don't get a response or you get a form response, I think reaching out again and again and again and sharing the latest, giving an update. The people I go to the most to get a first touch base are the people who, you know, bug me the most, who reach out and say, here's my experience, here's my challenge. And so I think it's not you, it's them if you don't hear anything. So just keep at it.
Thank you. Jeff?
Yeah, I think that's right. The polite persistence is definitely one of the ways to go. And you just, you know, you'll notice this, but I'm totally enamored with this Honeywell technology experience. I want to do an early childhood experience center, actually. I think that would be really fun. But I think one of the, and this is kind of a little bit sort of inside baseball and maybe a little bit too much, but what was interesting about the Honeywell technology experience is that it tried to tailor the experience based on the interests of the policymaker. And so when you walk in, they have this thing called Honeywell City. So it's this little model city. And they had like an iPad-like device at the front. And depending on the interest of the policymaker, you could push one of these icons. So if this is like, you know, if they're mostly interested in climate, they would put the energy efficiency button. And so the whole Honeywell City would go dark and they would shine lights on all the places where Honeywell technology was saving that city money. And so, or if they were interested in like defense or security, you know, they'd hit something else and they would shine spotlights on all the places that Honeywell technology was keeping that city safe, or you know, things like that. And so, you know, one of the things, you know, in terms of messaging might be like to better understand sort of what is the perspective of the policymaker, like what is their agenda and how does my work align with their agenda. And it's pretty easy to do with early childhood because we do so many things well, right? So if they're really interested in economic development or the economy or business, you know, you take the childcare angle and you talk to them about how important high quality early childhood settings are to promote work. Or if they're really worried about third grade reading scores or, you know, school readiness, you would take a different perspective and talk to them about, okay, here's how the way that we are preparing children for school. Or if they're interested, like from a Head Start perspective, if they're interested in sort of, you know, family supports, you know, here's how we do that. And so I know that's a little bit more advanced and takes a little bit more research, but understanding sort of where the policymakers coming from. And like when I do kind of advanced trainings on this, I'm like, you know, as early childhood educators, you know, we are inherently empathetic, right? And so sometimes we need to channel that empathy to understand what the position of the policymaker is and all of their stresses and all of what they're trying to do, and how do we sort of, you know, work our messaging into sort of their agenda. So,
okay,
I don't know if that was helpful.
Yes, thank you so much, Jeff. So we have another question. After we make contact with policymakers, what should folks expect from them? What's the expectation? So we'll start off with Jeff, if you don't mind.
Okay, can you say it one more time, Waymond? Sorry.
If after making contact with policymakers, what should we expect from them?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, not that much, Michelle, right? I mean, I think, yeah, unfortunately, I would say, you know, it all depends on what your ask is. So I think, you know, part of what you would, you know, you have the conversation and whatever sort of the nature of the conversation is it, you know, that you looking for something specific, and, you know, what do they commit to you as a result of that conversation? And then your job is to kind of follow up with sort of making sure that they adhere to that commitment. So
do anybody else want to take a stab at that? Michelle?
No, such a pessimistic way to look at it, but I think in the same way that we're trying to support young kids in their development, and they need lots of different experiences to be able to master an idea or a concept, I think that outreach to policymakers is about having them help develop their own sense of what childcare is, what early learning looks like, what your day-to-day experience looks like. And I think it's additive, and sometimes it's hard to tell if there's an impact. And I think that there has to be that like relentless optimism that you have with young kids, that even when you don't see that impact right away, that it makes a difference. I think that's true in policymaking too, because the work sometimes is slow and it's slower than we want. And I think sometimes it's because the experience with a policymaker didn't stick in quite the right way, right? Their focus is somewhere else. But sometimes again, it's not you, it's that the opportunity hasn't lined up quite yet. So I think polite persistence is the name of the game tonight.
Yep.
And I would just like to add, if I can, just Jeff mentioned to follow up, and I think that's really important. And just the mindset that you are the resource to them. And so after conversations, it's just good to follow up with what you covered, providing resources, and then follow up to that follow up. And so just expect to maybe continue to explain and answer questions as well that they may have given what you share with them.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much.
Follow-up questions is a really good sign. So you definitely want to make sure that you are being responsive to follow-up questions that they might have. Sorry.
Thank you so much. Okay, the next question is, how are you working with home visiting programs to support policy change?
Yeah, so I can speak to that. So I do calls kind of like this with our home visiting community. So in the same way that we've sat on calls with hundreds of childcare providers, we've sat with home visitors as well. I serve on a home visiting advisory council. We work closely with partners with Department of Health and Human Services. We have guidance out about how to be as safe as possible during COVID while you're home visiting. So I think there's a lot of attentiveness and an acknowledgement that early education and care has a broad coalition supporting it, and people who sometimes exist in relative silos, and we need to do outreach into those communities directly as well. So I'm really excited. The models, I think, do a really nice job connecting home visitors and the voices of home visitors with policymakers. And I think the models are a real asset in the home visiting space and being able to lift up your voices and your experiences. But I think everything we've talked about today, it's not unique to a childcare provider. So if you're a home visitor on the line, like all of your notes apply in talking about that home visiting space as well.
Anybody else want to?
Yeah, I'll jump in just really briefly. With Hope Starts Here, we are really galvanizing, several aspects of the community. And as I mentioned earlier, one of our policy priorities that we're focusing on now is universal screening and a referral system, which includes home visiting. So we're pushing for that, advocating for the need to establish that system.
Okay, so I got another question out here, and this is a great one. How do we know who to contact? We wouldn't email the governor or the mayor directly. So how do they know who to contact? So somebody want to take a stab at that? Shondra, since you're here locally and you are voice, Hope Start Here is our major voice. So take a stab at that one, if you don't mind.
Your legislators, your district legislators will be who you would want to contact. And you can find that information by going online and looking that up, and as well as their bios are on there, so you can see for the most part, they're there, so you can see what they are focusing on and what they've committed to. And so just really making sure you have your district leaders' attention and ears and communication with those representatives in your district.
Michelle?
And you can absolutely email the governor directly. There's a form on her website. You put your information in, and that information comes into our team, and we have people who respond directly, who filter your questions to policy people like me, or to our state agencies to be able to answer questions or respond to your feedback. So we'd love to hear from you directly.
And then it's just a matter of kind of understanding sort of, is it a federal policy issue that you're thinking about? Is it a state policy issue? Because if it, it's federal, you'd be working sort of with your senators and your congressional delegation. If it was something that's relevant to the state, you would, work with the governor and the legislature, and just, initially kind of sorting that out, and then finding the right person.
Okay, we have another question. We have, with a food issue here in the city of Detroit, we have an issue with child care providers. We have essential workers that's trying to work. How can we increase the business, early child care business, for folks who want to get started? How can we increase that? Michelle, if I can throw that one at you.
Yeah, for sure. So that's something we have been talking a lot about at a state level, is how do we make it just a little bit easier, that if you are interested in opening home-based childcare or a center-based childcare, that we help you kind of work shoulder to shoulder with you to get started in this business. Right now, you need to do a lot of work on your own before you come to the state and say, I'd like to be licensed. And so we're looking at what could we do to make that process easier, just so the steps are more clear, you have someone to call and support you and help you, and are there financial resources that we can use to support you? Because what we recognize is that a lot of parents are choosing home environments right now, and so many of our home-based providers really help us address gaps in our system, second, third shift, care for infants and toddlers, care for children with special needs, and we need more of you. So we're certainly doing work with partners like Hope Starts here to say, what's the strategy to be able to make this, again, just a little easier for people who are interested and ready to jump in, but need a little bit of support. So stay tuned. I wish I had a better answer today, but more.
Shondra, could you, Jeff, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. So that, I think that's such a great question. I think, just thinking sort of across the country, I think one of the federal programs is called these preschool development grant programs. And what they did was they allowed a number of states to look at their childcare needs through like a needs assessment, and then to develop a strategic plan. And one of the things that was coming up over and over in a lot of these needs assessments, I'm sure in Michigan as well, was just, this dramatic need for, supply of childcare, particularly for infants and toddlers. And I know that in response to that, a number of states proposed business development grants, where, if you were interested in starting a business to care for children where there was a lack of supply, infants and toddlers, rural areas, that they would provide, startup grants. And I can be happy to sort of provide information on some of the models. I think Maryland has a model, Idaho is another model that I've been reading about. And so, I think there's an opportunity there, because I know that getting through the licensing or getting registered, is cumbersome and sometimes costly. And the states were trying to offset that through these business development grants, with not only the grant, but also with some technical assistance from the state to be able to make it through.
Thank you, Jeff. Michelle mentioned letters. What is the best way to engage lawmakers? Is there a difference between local and government? The best way to get past gatekeepers. So I'm taking that the question is, sometimes letters don't get up to where they need to get to. So if people hijacking the letters and not getting them to the right place, how do we get past that? I'll start off with you, Michelle.
Yeah, I think that's a place where partnering with organizations like Hope Starts here, like other advocacy organizations who have paid staff whose job it is to develop and maintain that relationship and help you get past gatekeepers. I think that is a place where their day-to-day attention to advocacy, as opposed to your day-to-day attention to kids and families, is a really good partnership, because their job is to know how to do that and to connect you with the right people, whether it's in the governor's office or in a legislative office, and finding ways to plug your voice in where it can have the most impact. And I think that partnership can really save you a lot of energy and time, and leverage the experience and expertise of others in your community.
Okay, Jeff.
I would just say, like, with regard to letters, I always preferred 20 separate letters from stakeholders than one letter with 20 stakeholders signing on, because it was, I could sort of hold, I could do a visual with the letters. I don't know. And so, I mean, I don't never really perceived any issue with the letters not getting to the intended audience. It's more about sort of how do you leverage the letters in a way that will be most impactful. And I think, when I would get one letter with 20 people's names on it, it just wasn't as impactful as 20 separate letters, if that's helpful.
Shondra?
Yes, I will say, in addition to what's already been shared, also leveraging those organizational efforts and work groups and committees will also help with pushing things through, as Michelle already mentioned, and because of those connections and those unified efforts will also help get attention.
Okay, thank you. So once again, if you have any more questions, please put them in the chat. We talked about ways to really get our voice heard by joining Hope SARS here, Detroit Champions for Hope. Please go on to register for that. Complete surveys, write letters, make phone calls. You want to share any last thoughts, Jeff, before we turn it back over to Tara?
I mean, I just want to say thank you for all of the work that you do every day, working with children and families, making their lives better. And I know this is just one more thing that we're asking you to do. And but it's really important. So, but thank you so much for all you do. And we're hoping to get this relief package passed, and
yes,
more help will be on the way.
That will be helpful. Michelle?
I've had the honor of meeting with hundreds and hundreds of childcare providers in my role, and I've never a single time had an interaction with someone that I thought wasn't a good use of my time. Ever. Every single conversation I've had has helped me better understand. So again, that butterfly in your stomach when you're nervous to share your experience, I've never felt that. So when you're having that conversation, when you're sharing your experience, I think be brave, be bold, be vocal, and know how much value that.
Shondra?
Thank you. I do count it an honor and a privilege and a joy to do what I do. And I know that is true for Hope Starts Here entirely. And so continue to partner with us so that we can continue to make change and progress, and together we can do it.
Thank you so much, guests, for being on here. Now I'm gonna turn it back over to Tara.
I would like to say a thank you to Waymond Hayes for doing a fantastic job of being a moderator tonight. And I would like to say too, from my own opinion and my perspective as a person who works in public media, voice is so critical, and feeling heard is such an empowering piece for us as humans, me being a woman as well. I really want to thank Michelle, Jeff, and Shondra for feeling so genuine tonight, and feeling, I felt like this was just a very human panel, and it was nice for you to really take the time to let us know how to be heard, how to feel heard, and I appreciate everything you do as well. Thank you everyone for attending tonight. On behalf of Kresge and School Readiness Consultation and Detroit Public Television, keep on having a voice, and we will keep amplifying it